This week marks the start of another season of baseball for the Tampa Bay Rays. They'll face the Toronto Blue Jays in their first home series at Tropicana Field, the stadium that's nearing the end of its residency in downtown St. Petersburg. A world-class development that will fuel our economy for decades to come. That's how St. Petersburg Mayor Ken Welch described the multi-billion-dollar plan to transform Tropicana Field and the sea of asphalt parking lots surrounding it. But it's not a done deal just yet. I'm Matthew Petty, and today on Florida Matters, what are the next steps in building a new home for the Tampa Bay Rays? The heart of the current debate isn't so much about sports, it's about money, specifically how much the city and Pinellas County and the Rays ownership will invest. Later in the program, you'll hear from someone who's opposed to the deal. First, though, here's journalist Colleen Wright, who covers the city of St. Petersburg for the Tampa Bay Times. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So when it was announced back in September, St. Petersburg Mayor Ken Welch was full of promise.
The jobs, housing, office space, along with the opportunities for partnering with businesses that drive our economy, as well as the new businesses that will be attracted to this world-class development, will fuel our economy, create inclusive business opportunities, and be a catalyst for progress in St. Petersburg and Pinellas County for decades to come.
All right, so that's St. Petersburg Mayor Ken Welch talking about this new development, which includes, of course, affordable housing and the stadium itself. So, Colleen, can you provide an overview of the physical proposal the city and the Rays-Hines group are considering?
It's a lot to go over, but yes. So basically, it's like two projects in one. There's the redevelopment of the stadium. They would basically build a new fixed roof 30,000-seat stadium in the parking lot of the current site today. So they would demolish the old Trop and build the stadium. And that's a deal that comes together between the city and the county. It's funded half by the city and the county and the greater half by the Tampa Bay Rays. And then there's the surrounding redevelopment, and that involves the sale of 65 public acres, and that would be a sweeping redevelopment that there's plans for the first purpose-built African-American museum for the Woodson Museum of Florida. There would be, I think, minimum 5,000 housing units. At this time, it's about 600 affordable that are on-site, another 600 affordable off-site. And it would also have a hotel space, about 14 acres of open space, a music hall. All in all, it's 86 acres of redevelopment, and it's about a $6.5 billion investment.
Of course, this is a very expensive development or expensive proposal. Can you tell us who will be spending the money for this project?
Absolutely. So the stadium alone is $1.3 billion. About $600 million of that will come from the county and the city. The county's split, I want to say, is about $312 million, and the city's is $287 million. So you can see how that splits. The Rays, the team, have the larger share of that half. That's just the stadium. On the surrounding redevelopment, the 65 acres, public acres, would be sold for $105 million. That is the highest price offered by the Rays and their development group, Hines. However, some people say that's really low compared to market value. A 2023 appraisal showed that the land is at least worth somewhere like $270 or so million, $280 million. And so it is being sold at a discount. And the city is also paying $130 million for infrastructure costs for that land. So that's like roads, lampposts, the demolition of Tropicana Field. And the Rays and Hines would be on the hook for any cost overruns.
Now, the original deadline for the process has passed. So what's kind of left to be resolved at this stage?
This project is not happening without official votes from the St. Petersburg City Council and the Pinellas County Commission. It's not clear which vote would come first. The city side of this is more complicated because of the sale of that land, right? And the city is putting $130 million more toward that infrastructure piece. So the city's part is a little bit more complicated. At this point, lawyers on all sides, for the city, for the county, for the Rays and Hines, are all getting together and finalizing documents. I put in a records request. So far, I have drafts for 12 documents. That's not all the documents that need to be ready, and it'll be a minute. This vote could take place, at least on the city council side, maybe in May. However, one of the city council members has said, we need to do 2 workshops on this, one for the stadium, one on the redevelopment, and we need at least 2 weeks in advance to go over the documents ahead of that workshop to be prepared to ask questions. those meetings have not even been scheduled yet. So even May at this point is very tentative.
Where does the public come into this then? Is there going to be time for the public to speak out?
Great question. When it goes for an official vote, it will be at a city council meeting. It will also be at Pinellas County Commission meeting, and there will be public comment at those votes. Again, we don't even know when the workshops are happening. We don't know when those votes are scheduled yet. So those are times for public comment for that. There have been opportunities for the public to speak at some of those community benefits meetings I was mentioning, where the public can weigh in there. There's been a public forum that was held at the Coliseum in St. Petersburg when this process for vetting community benefits started in December. So there have been points, and also folks just show up to city council meetings with nothing on the agenda about the stadium or the redevelopment, and they'll speak for or against it. The St. Petersburg Area Chamber of Commerce has been getting members to go and speak to how the project would be a benefit. Other advocacy groups, also kind of do the same and kind of speak up and say, hey, this is not a very good deal. Maybe we can make it better, but it doesn't do enough for affordable housing, or the jobs commitment isn't there. So folks are speaking out at certain opportunities here and there, but for the final vote, that might be in May, and again, not scheduled yet.
Now, you did a great piece on this recently in the Tampa Bay Times. I want to ask you about some of the concerns that you wrote about. So what are you hearing in terms of concerns and support from council members?
I'll start with the concerns. The concerns that I'm hearing are that just not enough is known yet. It's been over a year since Mayor Ken Welch picked the Rays Hines team, so negotiations have been going on now for 14 months or so. But it is also very complicated. It's a lot of money, and it's very complicated. But we just don't know a lot of the financing. Last time I asked a few weeks ago, it wasn't even clear what half the money from the sale of the $105 million for those 65 acres, half that money, they didn't have an answer for what to do with that. So they are still working out a lot of the finer points. Some of the city council members who I spoke to who are kind of excited about the deal think that this is maybe a good deal in the fact that, we keep the team here. We have the team paying for more than half of the stadium. They're going to assume all the risk and cost overruns of the redevelopment, and it's going to bring housing and jobs and do more than the sea of asphalt that is there, that eventually it'll become taxable. The timeline is also a controversial thing of just when some of these things might come online. It is a very long build out. This won't be completely ready until about 2042 or something like that.
Wow.
And there's some concerns there of when are certain things going to come online. But I think we just don't know a lot yet. But some people just say that the Rays are a good corporate citizen. Hines is a good developer. They trust that process. They trust that the mayor, whose grandfather owned a woodyard in the gas plant, is the right person to make sure that opportunities and jobs will come to those who have been waiting for it since Tropicana Field was built the first time. So I think more people are just waiting on the details to come through to really understand and be comfortable with voting on this, because it's a big deal. It'll be the biggest decision maybe ever in the history of St. Petersburg.
One of the concerns that has come up is attendance at Tampa Bay Rays games. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that and what you've heard in your reporting.
So I've spoken to economists that study public investment into sports stadiums and venues. I mean, this comes up in a lot of major cities all around the country for not just Major League Baseball, right? You have the NFL, NBA. I know that some economists have done research that shows that when you build a new facility, it'll have a novelty effect where more people will come to the development, at least in the first 5, 6, 7 years maybe, and then it might taper off. So long term, we don't know. My colleague Graham Brink, who's on the editorial board, did a piece on attendance, and he found that it's just not clear what happens in the long run, 10, 20 years from now, if the Rays will have that attendance. And the Rays, according to his reporting, did not provide anything that showed the attendance figures. I think from the best that I know, it's more of a, if you build it, they will come, possibly. And maybe the surrounding development will be enough. Like I said, there's a music venue, an African-American museum. There will be restaurants and shops and retail, housing. around it to lure people in, maybe lure people in. So maybe they come to a game and then they go to a restaurant after, and there's things to do in the off season. So as for attendance, yes, the Rays, I believe, had like the lowest attendance for like a playoff game, and that happened just a few months ago. So unclear. It might bring some people, maybe in the beginning. As for later, who knows? I would say it maybe is a bit of a gamble.
Now, you talked about affordable housing. That's been one of the flashpoints, I guess, in the plan. How did things change in terms of the initial plan from the Rays-Hines group and what we have now?
So Mayor Ken Welch will say that between the Rays and Hines' initial proposal to what it is now, it has more solid affordable housing. The original commitment, it was a little fuzzy and it's very confusing. But what Mayor Ken Welch negotiated in the plan that is there today is that there are 300 units right now at 60% of the area median income, 300 units at 80% of the area median income, and then I want to say it's 500 units at 100% and then 100 at 120%. Of course, 100% area median income and 120, those are more workforce housing, not so much affordable. Affordable is 80 and below. This Community Benefits Council that reviewed this package actually looked into more of the penalties. The penalties were actually quite low for not building affordable housing. I want to say they were $25,000 per unit. And there was some consternation over, well, couldn't Rays and Hines just, due to market factors, just buy out of the affordable housing? And they did recommend stiffer penalties for that. Some of those units on site are tied to parcels. So if they weren't going to build that parcel, they wouldn't just get that plot of land. But off-site, there is no such penalty. So they did increase more financial penalties for those to make sure that there is more affordable housing on-site and off-site. And I do believe that they tried to speed up the timeline to bring some of this affordable housing online because some of it might not be built out for a while.
Right. And so you've kind of laid out what we're hearing from folks who support it in terms of this is going to bring more business to the area. It's obviously going to be an improvement on what we have now. There is that affordable housing component, but there are some pretty outspoken groups who say this is not a good deal for the community. One of them is Faith in Florida. It's a multicultural network of faith groups, and they've basically been outspoken since the day the Rays held that flashy press conference about this in Tropicana Field. Let's hear from Dylan Dames, the Pinellas leader for Faith in Florida, was wary of the project months ago.
If they do it as a tourist attraction that extracts and leaches from public resources, then that's not something that we can stand for, and it's definitely not something the people that we organize can stand for.
So housing is a big concern there. They're also speaking about the difficult history of the place where the stadium now sits. The historic, predominantly black gas plant neighborhood was raised decades ago with the promise of jobs and economic opportunity. There's Emmanuel Sykes. He's the pastor of Bethel Community Baptist Church, and his original building once stood in the gas plant neighborhood. He and other local pastors felt the city betrayed the black community decades ago, and they're still doubtful.
It was a lie back then, it's a lie now.
So, how does the injustice that happened to those residents and ancestors of the gas plant neighborhood play into their concerns and concerns more broadly of St. Petersburg residents from what you're hearing?
That fear is very real. There are still folks alive whose families were displaced from the gas plant. And if you own land, you might have been compensated. If you own land in the gas plant, you might have been compensated. But if you were a renter, your whole community was taken from you. That fear is very real. I've spoken to families who say that, their mother or their grandmother died because of the trauma from being uprooted from that community. And so people are afraid that it's going to happen again, that it sounds really, really good right now. But, we talked about a long build out. Mm-hmm. It might be 20 years before this is done if it's approved. And will those things actually come to fruition? We'll have a different mayor, a different city council. And I think that's why, especially city council members, but also I think the public in general, is anxious to see what exactly is the timeline, what are the details, and what is in the legally binding contracts that elected officials are going to vote on and vote yes or no. But that fear is real, and some people say affordable for who? 60% area median income housing for those folks, 80%. Some people are like, well, what about 30? There's people who are even less fortunate than that. But if you talk to the mayor and if you talk to proponents of this idea, their argument back is, well, this project is not going to cure every ill. It's not meant to cure every ill. It's a start. And also maybe you shouldn't concentrate that much affordable housing maybe in one space. Then comes in the idea of maybe off-site housing scattered around, maybe for families, they want to be closer to schools, etc. So yeah, a whole community was burned. When the gas plant was there and it was zoned for redevelopment, there was supposed to be new housing, light industry, jobs. And later, the plan got changed to, we're going to build a multi-use sports facility here instead. But it was cleared out originally to bring those jobs and opportunities that never came. And if you look today, I mean, it looks exactly as it did 20, 30 years ago. So it depends how much faith you have in the process, but also what is in the details of these contracts.
We've been speaking with Colleen Wright, who has been reporting on the Tampa Bay Rays Stadium redevelopment plan for the Tampa Bay Times. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Up next, why a group of Pinellas County residents called No Home Run say this isn't a good deal for the county or St. Pete. Welcome back to Florida Matters. I'm Matthew Petty. Over the next few months, leaders in St. Petersburg and Pinellas County have some big decisions to make about the future of the Tampa Bay Rays. They'll vote on spending hundreds of millions of dollars to build a new ballpark on the Tropicana Field site, and whether to sell public land to the Rays Hines Group. The proposed development includes housing, shops, a museum, and a music hall. Last September, St. Pete Mayor Ken Welch said it will help right the wrongs done to the black community that was torn apart decades ago to make way for the Trop.
That community was promised a stake in the economic benefits that would come from the redevelopment of this land, and the agreement that we have forged with the Hines Rays Group will finally honor that promise.
Waleed Khalil owns Zaytoon Grill near the Trop. He told WUSF he's looking forward to a new stadium.
Oh, it will help it a lot. Will help it a lot. As long as my rent is stay down a little bit. Things is getting expensive, really.
Leaders of the Rays Hines Group did not reply to multiple requests to speak with Florida Matters by our production deadline. The invitation to speak with us remains, and when it happens, we'll bring that conversation to you. But not everyone's happy with the plan. Ron Diner is with No Home Run, a group of Pinellas County residents who say the development doesn't add up. Ron, thank you so much for joining me. Appreciate it.
Glad to be here.
So tell me about No Home Run. How did that come together? And had this conversation been happening prior to the unveiling of the financial breakdown of this plan for the new stadium last fall?
No, it actually started as a result of, an October 26th meeting where the city laid out the initial information about the plan that they had with Rays and Hines. Mm-hmm. And then it really was a small, and it still is really a relatively small, informal group of people. One of the people who had dug into the numbers initially and got me interested because of the numbers that he explained to us all.
Mm-hmm. Now, the homepage of your website says, "We love baseball, but we can do better." What do you mean by that?
Well, I think a lot of people like baseball. I go to some of the games. My son's got season tickets, and I go with them, and I've got a grandson that I go and watch play baseball. Mm-hmm. But it seems to me that if you are a city council member, and they are the people that have to make the final decision to whether to do or not do this particular deal.
Well, there's the county council too.
Right, the county commission as well. That their obligations are to do what's in the best interests of the people in the community, and baseball may or may not fit in there somewhere.
Mm-hmm. So you wouldn't be altogether too upset if there was no baseball stadium at all in St. Pete?
Well, the reality is that the stadium has never drawn very well in attendance. The baseball team hasn't. The team has always been good. They have obviously extremely good management, but the attendance has always been right near or at the bottom of attendance for all of the years that it's been there. I think the team would acknowledge, and many people, it seems to me, in the community acknowledge, that the team would be actually much better off. It was more in the center part, the economic center of the community, which is more over toward Tampa or up maybe near the dog track in St. Pete, but where there's a lot of crossroads and there's more of the population center. The team located down in St. Petersburg is limited terms of population because you got water surrounding it by three sides.
Yeah, which is, I mean, that's not how the team sees it. We'll play a little bit of sound from the team in a moment or two, but the debate over public money and the use of public money has been happening across the country for decades, including here in Tampa Bay, like mid-1990s. A half-cent sales tax was added in Hillsborough County to build what's now called Raymond James Stadium. $108 million of tax money went into the project that some people derisively called Community Investment Tax Stadium. Is that the primary motivation for why your group opposes this particular plan?
I think it's that plus the fact that I guess I would say it's not a fair deal in that in terms of the fact that the community is going to be investing money into the transaction, there's no demonstrable return that's going to come back to the community. And when you think about all of the other priorities that, say, like a city of St. Petersburg has, it should be getting a fair deal. It should be getting a reasonable return on its investment in order to make sure that it can meet the other priorities that exist in the community.
Mm-hmm. Just to kind of paraphrase here, you've written that, quote, we should spend more of our budget promoting the great variety of restaurants, the amazing beaches, the museums and shopping, all of which are of interest to more than 40% of tourists, not baseball, end quote. But if you look at it from the team's perspective, from Mayor Ken Welch's perspective, he's saying the development plan is about a lot more than baseball, saying it'll create office and medical space, retail space, hotel rooms, senior living residences, a 4,000-seat entertainment venue, conference and meeting space. Now, I want to play a little bit of sound here. His Tampa Bay Rays team presidents, Matt Silverman and Brian All, they gave an update about the project on a recent episode of the Rays podcast about the redevelopment. The podcast is called Here to Stay. And so here's Matt Silverman talking about why the Rays want to build the new stadium in the same location as Tropicana Field.
This area has continued to grow. Tampa Bay has grown. St. Petersburg continues to grow. And if you look out over the next 10, 15, 20 years, we have so much more confidence that this is going to be a great place for a ballpark and for a neighborhood that fits that ballpark. It's one of those great confluences of circumstance. You have 86 acres of a parking lot and a ballpark in a downtown that now is a great opportunity for this club and for this city to make into a world-class attraction, an incredible neighborhood, and something that's going to be a great economic engine for the city of St. Petersburg.
So what about that? I mean, are you concerned that too much money has been focused on downtown St. Pete? And also, I wanted to get your take on, the location. He's sort of saying, well, this area is going to grow. It makes sense for the future. You're saying we've got water on all sides. It's not a smart move.
Well, no, I think that what they're saying is it is a great location and it's a great opportunity for the community. The stadium and baseball really didn't have a whole lot to do with the development. And now there is great confidence in the area. And quite frankly, I think pretty much everyone would agree that the property is prime for development. The property around it is selling for parcels have sold between $12 and $20 million an acre right around this stadium. So there is a tremendous opportunity for this property to be developed. Mm-hmm. The question is why is baseball so interested in being involved with this transaction? Because remember, the team wanted to go to Tampa, which really makes most logical sense because that's where the center is. But apparently they could not strike a satisfactory financial deal with the city. From our perspective, they couldn't get enough free money. They then wanted to split the season with Montreal, and that didn't work out. The Major League Baseball wouldn't happen. So now what has happened is that this property is ready for development, and the city struck a deal with the team that is transferring a huge amount of city wealth from the city to this team. And that the benefit to the team, seems to us, is that while maybe they won't do as well in attendance any better than they did in the past, and there's nothing to indicate why they would, they are going to make a lot of money from the deal for the stadium and for the deal for the rest of the land.
So let me ask you then, what would you like to see happen if the city or county rejects this proposal?
Well, we're saying that there should be a fair deal done. If the Rays want to stay there, they ought to do a fair deal. They're a private company. They ought to, one, pay fair real estate taxes, just like all of us. And if they're going to ask the city and the county to pay for half the stadium, The city and the county ought to be in for half of the profits. And if they sold the team, they ought to be in for a share of the profits. The way the deal is currently structured, they're not getting one nickel of revenue that's coming out of this thing. I mean, what a public-private partnership that is. The team keeps all of the revenue. They keep the TV revenue. They keep the naming rights, which could be worth hundreds of millions of dollars. I mean, I don't exactly know, but they could be worth a lot. The city and the county get nothing in return.
I mean, the argument from the team and from people who back the stadium as well, look, it's kind of going to be this nexus of activity. It's going to be an economic engine, I think they call it, so you don't buy that?
The team's been there for 20-some years, and until the Dolly came along and the James Museum came along and the Pier came along, the only benefactor was Ferg's Bar. The proof is in the pudding. In addition, there's been 130 studies done of stadiums, and all of them demonstrate that there's no economic benefits that come out of a stadium. I mean, where would the jobs come from? I mean, people who work in the stadium, if you're selling beer, it's a part-time job for 80 days a year. There's nothing to demonstrate that a stadium is going to draw. Because you think about it also, think about this property, and again, if you went by it, you see all these apartments being built and office building right now, a new one being built as well. And you think about an apartment building, for example, or a condo. Would you like to live next to a stadium and at 9 o'clock at night when you're going out to walk your dog and the game's over and half the people have had a few too many beers and they're spilling stuff all over? You want to live next to a stadium?
I mean, it depends on how much you love the sport, right, I suppose?
Well, so far, as I said, the team's been at the bottom of attendance for the last, in all of its existence. So I guess there aren't that many people who love it there. There's a tremendous amount of interest in Tampa, but you can't get there. The traffic is horrendous. One other issue is, although, again, we're not opposed to keeping the stadium there, although we think the team would be much better off if it was in the, more in the center of the community. But all the surface parking is going to be gone once the stadium is built. They're going to have high-rise garages. I live in St. Pete. I come over here and go to the Strass. So they got 4,000 or 5,000 seats in there maybe. And every other time I come here, I get an email from them saying, there's something else going on. You better plan on coming early. Imagine, and again, it's only the few times, but New York Yankees are playing in Tampa in the stadium, the new stadium, and 25 or 30,000 people are trying to get in there, and now they're going to try and get into those parking garages. It seems to me it's going to be chaos. And if you were thinking about going downtown to eat, maybe you aren't going to go downtown to the restaurants because you're never going to be able to find a place to park.
We've been speaking to Ron Diner with No Home Run. Thank you so much.
Glad to be here.
That's our show for this week. Engineering support for this episode from Blake Bass and Jackson Harp. Production assistance from Mary Shedden. Our executive producer is Grayson Doctor. Subscribe to Florida Matters wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Matthew Petty. Thanks for listening.